Imagine you're asleep. It's 2 a.m. Your city is quiet. Your kids are in the next room. And then, without warning, the sky turns into a war zone. Not one explosion, not 10, not 100. 9,870 explosions, raining down from the sky in a single night. That is what Ukraine faced on May 3, 2026. 9,870 kamikaze drones, launched by Russia in one coordinated, merciless assault on a country that has already been bleeding for over 4 years. Let that number sink in. 9,870. That's not a typo. That's not a mistake. That's Vladimir Putin's message to Ukraine, to Europe, and to the entire world. We are not stopping. Welcome back. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because today we are breaking down the single largest drone assault in the history of this war. What happened, who was targeted, what Ukraine did to fight back, and what this terrifying escalation means for all of us. Stay with me, because this story is unlike anything we've covered before. To understand the scale of what happened on the night of May 2nd into May 3rd, you need to understand what a kamikaze drone actually is. These aren't your neighborhood hobby drones. These aren't surveillance tools. Russia's Shahed drones, built with Iranian technology, are flying bombs. They're loaded with explosives, they're programmed with a target, and they fly until they hit something or get shot down. They're cheap. Each one costs roughly $20,000 to $50,000 to produce. And Russia has been manufacturing them at an industrial scale, thousands every single month. Now here's the thing that makes this particular attack so jaw-dropping. Ukraine has been dealing with Russian drone attacks almost every single night since early 2023. The average attack would see anywhere from 50 to 200 drones launched in a single night. On really bad nights, Russia would push 300 or 400 drones into Ukrainian airspace. But 9,870? That's not a drone attack. That's a drone apocalypse. To put it in perspective, if you lined up 9,870 of these drones end-to-end, they would stretch for over 90 miles. If you fired one every 3 seconds, it would take you over 8 hours just to launch them all. And Russia launched all of them in one night. The attack began just after midnight on May 2nd. Ukrainian air defense systems immediately went into overdrive. Radar screens lit up like Christmas trees across the country. Operators across Ukraine, from Kiev in the north to Odessa in the south, from Kharkiv in the east to Lviv in the west, were all working simultaneously, tracking hundreds of targets at a time. And here's where the story gets both heroic and heartbreaking at the same time. Ukraine's air defense forces, through sheer skill and determination, managed to neutralize 249 out of those 268 drones in the latest wave tracked between specific reporting windows. Across the full day's combat window, Ukrainian forces shot down or electronically suppressed 175 Russian drones and 5 missiles between just 8:30 in the morning and 6:30 in the evening alone. That's an extraordinary success rate. But here's the brutal math of modern warfare. If Russia launches 9,870 drones, and Ukraine neutralizes even 96% of them, that still means nearly 400 drones get through. And 400 flying bombs hitting populated areas is catastrophic. Let's talk about what those drones actually did when they hit. Because behind every statistic in this war is a human being. A mother, a child, a student, a police officer just doing their job. In Dnipro, one of Ukraine's largest cities, a Russian missile slammed directly into a dormitory building at Dnipro National University. Students, young people studying to build a future for their country. Their rooms, their books, their lives, torn apart in an instant. One student was killed. Others were injured. The building that was supposed to be their safe haven became a crime scene. In Zaporizhia, the city that sits dangerously close to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, Russian drones struck residential areas. Explosions were heard across the city. Garages were hit. 9 people were injured, and that number climbed as the hours went on. In Kherson, a city that Ukraine liberated from Russian occupation back in 2022, a drone struck a civilian minibus. Not a military vehicle, not a weapons depot, a minibus. The kind of transport ordinary people use to get to work, to visit family, to live their lives. 2 people were killed, 7 more were wounded. Among them, a 46-year-old woman who was injured in a separate drone strike later in the afternoon. In Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, a Russian drone struck the entrance of a multi-story apartment building. 5 people were rushed to the hospital. A fire broke out. Residents who had been sleeping peacefully were suddenly running for their lives through smoke-filled hallways. In Mykolaiv, a port city in southern Ukraine, a ballistic missile struck in the early morning hours. 2 people were initially reported injured. By the time the full picture emerged, that number had climbed to 5. Private homes were damaged. Families lost everything overnight. In the Sumy region near the Russian border, one of the most consistently battered parts of Ukraine, 1 person was killed and 18 others were injured in a single 24-hour period. Russian forces attacked police cars with drones. In Bilopilya, a drone struck a police vehicle directly. 2 law enforcement officers sustained serious injuries. They weren't soldiers, they were cops, protecting their community. In the Odessa region, Ukraine's gateway to the sea, a Russian strike on May 3rd damaged 35 residential houses in the suburbs of Chornomorsk. 35 homes, families who had been living there, trying to maintain some semblance of normal life while a war raged around them. 2 people were killed in Odessa's port infrastructure attack. 5 others were injured. And in the Nikopol region, another city that has endured relentless bombardment throughout this war, 5 more people were injured in Russian attacks. Now I want you to sit with all of this for a moment. This is not a battlefield report. These are not military casualties. These are civilians. Students, mothers, police officers, grandparents, ordinary working people. The kind of people you'd find in any city, in any country on earth. And they are being killed and maimed every single day because one man, sitting safely in the Kremlin thousands of miles away, decided that Ukraine does not have the right to exist as a free nation. But here is the part of this story that the mainstream media doesn't always give enough credit to. Ukraine is not just absorbing these attacks. Ukraine is fighting back, and fighting back hard. Let's talk about what Ukrainian forces accomplished in the same 24-hour period that Russia launched its drone apocalypse. First, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces reported that throughout the entire month of April, they successfully destroyed 38 Russian air defense assets. 38. That means Ukraine has been systematically dismantling Russia's ability to protect its own airspace, a critical strategic move that pays dividends on the battlefield. Second, and this is genuinely remarkable, Ukraine struck 2 vessels belonging to Russia's so-called shadow oil fleet at the entrance to the port of Novorossiysk. The shadow fleet is Russia's way of circumventing Western oil sanctions, using ghost ships to keep oil revenues flowing into the Kremlin's war machine. Ukraine hitting these vessels isn't just a military victory, it's an economic strike. Third, Ukrainian drone operators from a unit called Lasars Group, part of the National Guard, managed to destroy a Russian R-330ZH Zhitel electronic warfare system. Now, if you're not a military tech nerd, let me tell you why this matters enormously. Electronic warfare systems are what Russia uses to jam Ukrainian drone signals, to disrupt communications, to blind Ukrainian forces on the battlefield. Taking one out doesn't just destroy a piece of equipment, it creates a hole in Russia's electronic shield that Ukrainian forces can exploit. Fourth, Ukraine's security service, the SBU, struck Russia's Perm region, located in the Ural Mountains, for the 2nd day in a row. Perm is over 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine's border. That's almost 1,000 miles inside Russian territory. Ukraine hit the Lukoil Permnefteorgsyntez oil refinery, disrupting operations at one of Russia's major energy facilities. Think about that for a second. While Russia is bombing Ukrainian universities and apartment buildings, Ukraine is reaching deep inside Russia and striking the economic infrastructure that funds the entire war effort. And then there's the battlefield itself. On May 2nd alone, there were 141 combat clashes between Ukrainian defense forces and Russian troops. The fiercest fighting was concentrated in the Pokrovsk sector, a strategically vital area in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk region, where Russian forces have been pushing hard for months. Increased pressure was also recorded in the Huliai and Kostiantinivka sectors. Ukrainian defenders stopped 26 separate Russian assault attempts in the Pokrovsk area alone in a single day. 26. That means Russian soldiers attacked Ukrainian positions 26 times and were repelled 26 times. And speaking of casualties, since Russia launched its full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, Ukraine's General Staff reports that Russia has now lost 1,332,950 troops. Over the last reported day, Russian forces suffered 1,080 casualties. 1,080 in a single day. For context, that's roughly the equivalent of a full battalion of soldiers gone in 24 hours. So let's zoom out, because what happened on May 3rd didn't happen in a vacuum. Russia's decision to launch nearly 10,000 drones in a single day is not just a tactical choice. It's a strategic statement. And to understand what that statement means, we need to look at what's happening politically, diplomatically, and militarily right now. On the diplomatic front, there's been a flurry of ceasefire talk. Putin proposed a short-term ceasefire to coincide with Russia's May 9th Victory Day celebrations. Zelensky responded with understandable skepticism, publicly asking whether this was a genuine peace offering or just a few hours of security for a parade in Moscow. And while those conversations are happening, Russia is launching 9,870 drones. That tells you everything you need to know about how serious Russia is about peace. Meanwhile, the front lines are shifting, slowly, painfully, but shifting. Russia has claimed the village of Myropilya in the Sumy region. They've taken Novodmitrivka north of Kostiantinivka. They're pushing toward Kostiantinivka itself, a heavily fortified area that Ukrainian forces have spent months building into what military analysts call a fortress belt. Ukraine's commander-in-chief, General Oleksandr Syrsky, has acknowledged that Russian assaults rose noticeably in April. More attacks, more pressure, more drones, more missiles, more guided aerial bombs. In a single day on May 2nd, Russia deployed 1 ballistic missile, 79 airstrikes using 254 guided aerial bombs, 9,870 kamikaze drones, and 3,203 artillery shelling attacks, including 44 using multiple launch rocket systems. 3,203 artillery attacks in one day. That's 133 artillery attacks per hour, more than 2 every single minute, for 24 hours straight. This is not the action of a military that's running out of steam. This is a military that has shifted to a war of industrial attrition, betting that it can outlast Ukraine's ability to defend, outlast Western willingness to supply weapons and money, and outlast the world's attention span. And that bet is not crazy. Because here's the uncomfortable truth, and I'm going to say it plainly because you deserve the truth, not comfortable talking points. The United States has signaled that it may be pulling back. Reports indicate that the U.S. is delaying arms shipments to Europe, potentially affecting Ukraine. President Trump has expressed frustration with both sides of the conflict. American troop presence in Europe is being reduced. Poland's prime minister has publicly condemned what he's calling NATO disintegration. Europe is stepping up, but Europe has its own limits, its own politics, its own defense industry constraints. And Russia is watching all of this, calculating, waiting to see if the West blinks. The 9,870 drones weren't just aimed at Ukrainian cities. They were aimed at the resolve of every country that has been supporting Ukraine. They were a message. We can keep doing this forever, can you? So where does this go from here? Military analysts are watching several critical indicators. The first is Pokrovsk. If Russia breaks through Ukrainian lines in the Pokrovsk sector, it opens up a corridor deeper into the Donetsk region, potentially threatening Ukrainian supply lines and allowing Russia to encircle Ukrainian defensive positions. This is the most dangerous active front right now, and it's where the war could genuinely turn. The second is Kostiantinivka. Ukraine has invested enormous resources in fortifying this area. If Russia's current push succeeds in cracking that fortress belt, the psychological and strategic impact would be enormous, both for Ukrainian morale and for Western political calculations about whether Ukraine can actually win. The third is Belarus. Zelensky has raised alarms about unusual military activity along Ukraine's shared border with Belarus. We don't know the details. Zelensky himself didn't specify publicly. But the implication is serious. If Russia is preparing a new offensive from Belarusian territory, Ukraine would face pressure from a completely new direction, stretching its already thin defensive lines even further. And the fourth, perhaps the most important factor of all, is what happens in the next few weeks with ceasefire negotiations. Russia's May 9th ceasefire proposal is either a genuine olive branch or a cynical delay tactic designed to give Russia's forces time to rest and regroup. Given that Russia launched nearly 10,000 drones at Ukrainian civilians in the same week it proposed a ceasefire, you don't need to be a geopolitical genius to figure out which way this probably cuts. Zelensky has made Ukraine's position clear. A few hours of pause for Putin's parade is not a ceasefire. Ukraine wants a full, lasting, verifiable cessation of hostilities, with real security guarantees, not just promises from a government that has broken every agreement it's ever made. The question is, will the world back him up? I want to end this section of our report with something that rarely gets enough attention. Because for all the drone counts, all the casualty figures, all the geopolitical analysis, there are 40 million people living through this every single day, and they haven't broken. Think about what it means to live in Zaporizhia right now. To go to sleep knowing that tonight might be the night a drone finds your window. To send your kids to school, if the school is still standing, and spend all day wondering if they'll come home. Think about the university student in Dnipro who survived the missile strike on their dormitory, who woke up in a building that had just been hit by a ballistic missile, who walked out of the rubble, dusted themselves off, and chose to keep going. Think about the two police officers in Bilopilia who got in their car to protect their community, not knowing that a Russian drone was already tracking them. These are not abstractions. These are people. And they are showing the world something remarkable, that under the most sustained aerial bombardment in modern European history, the human spirit does not easily break. Ukraine shot down 249 out of 268 drones in a single wave. They struck oil refineries 1,500 kilometers inside Russia. They knocked out electronic warfare systems. They stopped 26 Russian assault attempts in one sector in one day. They are exhausted. They are outnumbered. They are outgunned in some ways. And they are still standing. 9,870 drones in a single night. That's the world we are living in right now. That is what's happening. Not in some distant history book, not in a movie. Right now, as you watch this video. This war matters. What happens in Ukraine doesn't stay in Ukraine. The precedent being set here, whether aggression is rewarded or stopped, will shape the world your children and grandchildren grow up in. Stay informed. Stay engaged. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening. If you found this breakdown valuable, please hit like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to see this. We'll be back with our next video on the ceasefire crisis, Putin's May 9th gambit, what it really means, and why Zelensky is not buying it. Don't go anywhere.